Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to another adventure in history. I'm your host, Shane McInnes, and hope everyone has had a great day. It's been an interesting day for me, lots of work. Had to do some teaching stuff, had to do some paperwork stuff. Good old-fashioned elbow grease, never hurt anybody though, right? But hope everybody's doing well. Hope that the weather that's gone through our world in the last few days hasn't affected anyone negatively. I know I'm tired of having tornadoes here in Mississippi. I saw some data earlier today that said that we have had 77 since the beginning of January, just in Mississippi. Yet another way that Mississippi is number one at being something that's not so positive. We've got that adult onset diabetes and teenage pregnancy on lock. Now we're just adding tornadoes to the top of it. Hello, everybody. Hola. Just to let everybody know a little bit about the stream, this is a weekly history stream where I try my best to sort of tear down the stuffiness and the boringness that a lot of people experienced in history. Don't forget STDs. We are pretty high up the list in STDs. Good old Mississippi. If you're interested more about I said teen pregnancy. If you're more interested about the stream, by all means, please check out my previous installments. I've got all of those saved on video right now. I'm actually working on trying to figure out how to get those over to YouTube so that they will be saved sort of perpetually. Lagging a little bit. Oh, that's no good. Are you still using the phone app? I've been having a lot of people complaining about the phone app. I don't know what's going on with that. I had made some hardware adjustments and hoped that I would not be so laggy. But if that is still the case, I apologize. I'm on my PC tonight. Oh, well, that's no good. All right, well, if stuff happens and I go crazy and the stream goes down, just let me know. As a note, this is a very, very open stream. If you have anything that you think would be pertinent, you are welcome to put that in the chat. If you have questions or comments or sarcastic remarks or pretty much anything goes. This is not a classroom. I want everybody to feel very comfortable, and I hope that we can have some good times, right? So if this is your first time here, welcome. Remember that if you would like, there is a little button up here in the top corner that is a heart that will follow me. That lets you know when I'm online, and then right beside that is a little bell. That bell will notify you when I go live. If it gets too weird, I'll swing my silencing hammer, though. Yeah, hopefully it doesn't get weird. I mean, a little bit of weird is okay, right? Everybody's definition of weird is a little bit off. Also, you can see here my email address, mckinnistravels@gmail.com, if you have any questions about anything, or you just want to say, hey, send me an email. Also, you can see Twitter and Instagram at somehistoryguy. I am not the world's best at creating Instagram and Twitter content, but I am trying. If you have ideas about what I should be posting on stuff like Instagram and Twitter, send me an email and let me know. Or track me down, or send me a whisper, or just do something. Pro streamer. Yeah, I know. Like I'm working on this stuff. I am working on being pro streamer. One day I will be pro streamer. We will conquer all of the streams. Because we know how people conquer other people, because we'll talk about that in history, right? So tonight's topic is human migration. And as always, I guess as of the last couple of episodes, I have tried to come up with a cutesy little title that is a giant nerd reference, if you get it. Are you suggesting hominins migrate? So if you don't get that joke, that's okay. You're welcome to ask, and I'll be more than happy to explain. But if you do, there's a little Easter egg for you right there off the bat. So, as always, I am happy to answer questions. African or European hominins. Mostly African hominins at this point. We'll be talking about Africa quite a bit tonight. So make sure that if you have questions, you put those in. There is a little bit of a delay between when you post a question and when I get to see it. So if I don't answer your question immediately, please do not feel offended. I will try to get to it. I have gone back and watched some of my videos, and I've noted that I end up repeating myself sometimes because I pause in the middle of a statement to respond to a stream. I'm going to try, or to a comment rather. I'm going to try to be a little bit better about that moving forward. So I'm going to try to finish the thought that I'm on before I get back to your stream or your comment there in the question box. So hopefully that will eliminate me repeating myself, which I have a habit of doing, right? And as always, thanks everybody for attending. And here we go. So where we stopped talking last time, which you don't have to watch, by the way. You don't have to watch these in order or anything of that nature to get the full experience. But for those of you that were with me, we talked a lot about what makes us human, the difference between the various species within the Homo genus. We, of course, are Homo sapiens, the wise men. If only we could act like that always, right? Alas. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about how we got everywhere. Of course, we spoke a little bit to this in the last stream, or you know it all, yeah. So we spoke a little bit to this in the last stream about some of these hominins moving out of Africa, but we did not cover the Homo sapiens migration pattern because I wanted to keep that a little bit separate, because it does have a lot to do with how we interpret history. And there are a lot of parts and a lot of theories and a lot of kind of moving parts in how we build these migration models. And before we get completely started in that, I did want to talk a little bit about the forces that drive us to migrate in the first place. Because if we're talking about early hominins, again, we're talking about this region over here in what is today sub-Saharan but Eastern Africa, this Great Rift Valley region, which again is Ethiopia and Kenya and Tanzania today. And this was a nice habitable area. It had lots of food, it had a pleasant climate, it had enough rain, it had a variety of individual sorts of geographic structure. So we have rivers and we have forests and we have hills. It's a pretty place. So why would anyone want to leave that? So what are the forces that humans are encountering? And when I say humans here, I do specifically mean Homo sapiens, that make us move. Well, this is partially going to be because we are so much more intelligent, or at least we should be more intelligent than the previous hominins, those being, your Homo neanderthalensis, your Homo erectus, or your Homo heidelbergensis, or Homo habilis. All of these things should not be as intelligent as we are, and that's going to cause us to interact much differently with our surroundings, right? We can see things, we have this ability to plan, we can look at a stick and see a spear, or we can look at a rock and see within that rock a tool. And this ability to interact in more involved ways with our surroundings are going to give us a new thing called competition. And competition exists within all of nature, right? If you're familiar with the origin of the species of Darwin or any of the larger evolutionary theories, you've heard of survival of the fittest. Well, humans are especially fit. Maybe not me. I could probably spare to lose 10 or 15 pounds. But that was a self-deprecating joke, by the way, and you're welcome to laugh at me. That's okay, too. I'm a giant nerd. I can handle it. I'm wearing a giant Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt, if that doesn't tell you anything. Anyway, so we are very fit when it comes to being a species, and because of that, we're going to start competing for natural resources. And initially, this is not going to be that big of a deal, because, again, we're talking about Africa. It has a wide variety of habitats and biomes for us to live in. It gives us a lot of food. It gives us a lot of space. But eventually, because humans are so fit, our population is going to begin to increase. And this is not something that happens very, very rapidly. We're going to be talking about a period of time tonight that stretches almost 100,000 years. So migration is not something that happens overnight. And when we talk about migration, a lot of people sort of think that there is this one big movement, right? Where everybody that's leaving this place is going to pick up and walk 3,000 miles across the globe. Couldn't we all lose 10 to 15 pounds except for Mac in a lab coat? If Mac in a lab coat lost 15 pounds, I don't know what would be left of him. Maybe his skeleton. He would be skeleton in a lab coat. I've known Mac in a lab coat, by the way, since high school. He's one of my closest friends, so I feel like that was a comfortable joke to make. I'm not insulting his size. He's very proud of his low body fat. Anyway, so when we're moving in groups, the groups that we're talking about are not usually incredibly big, tens of thousands of individuals. Usually what's happening in these migration movements is that individual groups called family groups or tribes, if you want to call them that, are moving, but they're not really moving very far. So imagine if we have this room around me, right? And if I was in this room by myself, which I am right now, it's pretty comfortable. I can move around. I've got everything that I need. I can get whatever I want to, and I feel pretty comfortable. So if I were cramming more people in here, we could fit 5 or 6 people in here probably comfortably, but then it starts to sort of get uncomfortable, right? So eventually 3 or 4 of the people are going to get up out of this room and go to the next room. Now, that doesn't mean everybody left here, and that doesn't mean that everybody that left has anything necessarily to do with each other. Maybe they were just the ones closest to the door, and so they moved to one room over. Well, so if we're imagining human populations of Homo sapiens in Africa, what we're talking about are these little tribes that are going to move maybe one valley over, or they might move just outside of visual range. Maybe they're moving 5 or 6 miles away to find more open habitat. And this is why migration takes so long. I get students in my class at college that ask me all the time, if humans left Africa about 100,000 years ago, why did it take them so long to get to North America? Well, first off, if you were walking from Africa to North America, it would take you forever, right? This would be a year-long sort of thing. But they're not walking nonstop, and they're also not walking to move all the way to North America. If we're leaving Africa, we might leave one zip code and move to the next zip code, right? And then our population is going to expand to the point where our little tribal group of maybe 100 to 150 individuals decides that it's time to just kind of move on. So this is the sort of migration that we're talking about. It's not big honking groups of people traipsing randomly across the middle of nowhere. It's just a few people here and there moving out as they see fit. And because of this, it's also very hard to track migration. And this is where a little bit of the stuff that we talked about in the first 2 episodes is really going to help us out. If we're looking at small groups of human beings, and there are maybe 100 to 150 individuals, what are the chances that even one of those individuals is going to die in such a way that their body is preserved by nature? That's a gamble. It's also a very, very small percentage chance, considering all of the natural things that have to happen for a body to be preserved. So we don't know a lot about a lot of these things. We have mostly based these models off of tools where we find examples of artwork or human remains, but the picture that we're going to discuss today is still very, very up in the air. So one of the things that has been, especially recently since the discovery of DNA, that's one of the things that we've been really using are these genetic markers called haplogroups. So a haplogroup is very basically, and I know I'm going to get in trouble if I try to get too deep with this with my wife, who knows much more about this than I do. But very basically, a haplogroup is a small group of individuals in relationship to the larger population. that have a certain genetic sequence that is identifiable to them, right? So if we're looking at the entire string of a person's DNA, and we are looking at all the different chunks, and we find this group of people that lives in this area all have this same little chunk. Well, that identifies their haplogroup. So myself, when I did my DNA test, they chunked all my DNA up and they told me, oh, you've got all these Northern European haplogroups because, I don't tan and I am tall and I have very broad shoulders and I don't tan. I've said that a couple times. Bit of a joke. Trying to get everybody with me. Again, really as wide and pasty as I am. Yeah, I know. Northern European. Again, if you guys have comments, let me know. I'm not going to badger you about it, but you're welcome to speak. So these haplogroups are going to be able to go back in time, and every person has multiple different haplogroups that you can attest your history to and your ancestors to. And these haplogroups have been arranged chronologically. And if we look at the period of time that humans have migrated, we can actually find specific periods of time where a haplogroup first originated. We can trace people's DNA back to the origins of their individual ethnic group sometimes, or their individual haplogroup other times. And we can bring all of this information together with the archaeological remains that we have and with the sort of human cultural stuff that we have, our artwork or our burials or even our skeletons, right? So these haplogroups are broken down into two different types. I won't go too far into this, but if you're interested, Google this stuff. It's very, very fascinating. One of your haplogroups comes from your mother, and this is traced through mitochondrial DNA. And if you are a guy, it's a lot easier for us because we also have a haplogroup that is unique to the Y chromosome, which can give us a much more diverse idea of where our ancestors came from. So ladies, you can still do this. It's a lot easier though if you want to do genetic testing for you to also get your dads involved so that you can sort of trace what part of your X chromosome came from your dad and which part of your other X chromosome came from your mom. They can do a pretty good job of this, but it helps if you have sort of multiple generations of data to look at. So these haplogroups are pretty interesting, and we've been using a lot of this stuff lately to help us figure out how people have moved around. And this scientific data has actually changed a lot of our patterns and a lot of our ideas about how humans first migrated. We've discovered quite a bit of human activity that we never really even knew existed because of haplogroup kind of stuff. And I'll mention some of this as we move through the sort of pattern here. So haplogroups are neat. You should look them up. All right. So to begin with, we're going to be in Africa, right? And our first movement out of Africa is into this region right here. So this is the Arabian Peninsula here, and this region right here, some people call it the Holy Land. The geographic region is actually called the Levant. What is the land speed velocity of an unladen hominin as fast as you can run? Some of us are not as fast as others, and some of us are Usain Bolt, who runs ridiculously fast, right? So we're going to move into this region right here from Africa. And again, the original ancestral homelands of hominins are going to be here, and it's not too far across this little strait. During the Ice Age, when we're talking about this migration happened somewhere around 130 to 100,000 years ago. So during that time period, we were in an Ice Age. And the little strait of water that separates Africa from Arabia here was actually much more narrow, and it was much shallower. So some people think you could have actually waded across right here. Of course, it is connected by land here through what is modern-day Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula to Asia. So this region here, the sort of greater Arabia, or what some of us in the history world call the Near East, is going to be the first destination for our human groups. And it doesn't look like the first group had very much luck. They got into the region. They didn't seem to have necessarily the best skills of living in this new type of area, and they had a pretty high casualty rate. And we know this because we actually have a significantly large amount of remains from this area, but not any more past this area for about another 30,000 years. So it looks like the first group that left Africa somewhere between 140 and 130,000 years ago got over into this region, figured out that it was a giant desert, and then went, no. Were Homo sapiens farming at this point? No, at this point we are still very much the hunter-gatherer mode. We will start seeing our first sort of attempts at farming, and I say that very, very loosely, a little bit closer to the 10,000 range, and then we start seeing our first attempts at villages or sedentary life somewhere around the 9,000 BC range, and we get our first real cities where we actually have gone over the what we call the agricultural revolution, that point where we can make more food than we need. That happens in the Near East somewhere between 3,300 and 3,000 BC. So at this point, at the 130 to 100,000 BC, we are way, way before farming. So the way that we're living at this point is hunter and gathering. And this is a sort of mechanism that drives migration as well, because as your population grows, if you're staying in one sort of region and moving around, you are exhausting the natural resources that are there much more quickly. So some people have to leave, and you got to kick Jimmy out of the group so that he goes to the other side of the mountain range and then, can hunt and gather on the other side of the hill. Pointy stick beats gazelle. Well, that's the hope. One interesting thing about humans that we figured out fairly recently, or that, well, I should say it this way, that we have anthropologists that are hypothesizing, but that people are sort of jumping on board, is that one of the biggest advantages that modern Homo sapiens have over previous hominins is our lung capacity. And you go, what the devil does that matter? We can run for a long time, right? So if you compare the average human being, the land speed velocity of an unladen hominin, right? If you take the average human being, we can't run as fast as a cheetah. I think human speed tops out somewhere like 27 miles per hour. I don't know if that's accurate or not, so don't take my word for it, but it's somewhere around in there. Cheetahs can run upwards of 60 miles per hour. They can run almost twice as fast as we can, but they can only do that for very, very short periods of time. The average water buffalo can run a lot faster than a human, but it can't do it for as long as we can run. And a lot of the anthropologists that are working right now with human physiology are saying that one of the ways that we are most successful as hunters is that we literally chased our prey to death. We would just jog after them, and they would run away. And then we would just keep jogging, and then they would run away. And we would just keep jogging. And eventually, the prey animal would literally keel over, and then we would poke it with a pointy stick. I'm not joking. That is probably how the first hunters really got successful. 28 miles per hour for a human. I wasn't too far off. That's pretty good guessing. Thank you. So we're still hunting and gathering, but this is a mechanism that pushes us around, right? Because we have to go find more stuff. We Forrest Gumped it. I just kept running and running. Yes, Forrest Gump would be an excellent Middle Stone Age hunter because he would just keep running and the animals would end up dying. In the book, Forrest Gump has a friend that's an orangutan that he gets shot into space with. The book is way different than the movie. You should read the book. Everybody should read the book. Okay, so when we get over here to the Near East and this region over here, there are going to be a couple of sites that are going to be sort of our type sites that are going to let us know when humans arrived. One of them I mentioned in our earliest stream as a place called Cafes, or the School Cave over here in Israel. There's going to be another area that's over in this region, and I guess I could type these so that everybody knows where I'm talking about. Cafes. And the other one is over here in the United Arab Emirates, and I'm doing this thing where I'm not typing the right way. I'm pointing and then stopping and then pointing and then stopping. So this country today is the United Arab Emirates. This is where Dubai is. And there's a region over there called Jebel Faya that is an early site where we have discovered human leftovers, especially tools, and in the case of the Cafés cave, human elements, leftover pieces of human teeth, I think. Teeth and jawbones and a skull. So we know that humans were over there. They're over there around 100,000 years ago. And the next step is going to be this region right here, which is today the modern day country of Iraq. And there is quite a bit of debate over how we got into Iraq and this other large country right here, which is Iran. And some people say that the group that left over here through the Levant region sort of just looped over into Iran and Iraq. The other group of modern anthropologists say that the group that ended up in Iraq and Iran came out of this southern Arabian migration spread. So did they come from the north or did they come from the south? I don't think they came from Operation Desert Storm, though we definitely went over there multiple times for increasingly dumb reasons. So how we got there is a little bit of a question mark. It's probably a little bit of both, because in our ancient world, you're going to see lots of ancient civilizations that are going to sort of originate here in the Mesopotamia region. Today, it looks a lot less cool than it would have in the ancient world. The Iraqi government has put lots of dams on both the Tigris here and the Euphrates rivers. In the ancient world, all of this area would have been very bright, vibrant green because the rivers would have overflooded their banks, and this was a very, very fertile area in the ancient world. Today, not so much. But it's important to know about this region because it is going to be one of the more important sort of hubs for human movement. And one thing that I do want to point out that you can sort of take with you is if you know this pattern of how people first moved through the world, it's really going to start overlapping with a lot of other stuff you might learn about history. If you look at how countries get invaded, or if you look at how armies move in the ancient world when they're marching, this is a very much water flows downhill sort of scenario. Humans are going to move through the easiest terrain, going all the way back to the first time Homo sapiens actually entered these regions. So the region here that we're talking about, this Mesopotamia, Iraq, Iran area, is going to get populated somewhere in the 90s to the 80,000s BC range. And the next step, you might think, be up towards what is Europe, but it's actually down the coastline here towards India. And this is part of the evidence that the anthropologists suggest, the anthropologists that are suggesting the southern Arabian route to Mesopotamia use. Right, you got to stay near water, and they say, okay, so they came this way, and then they just kept right on going over here. The Persian Gulf in ancient times was a lake. It was not nearly as deep. This, by the way, body of water here is the Persian Gulf. It is neither as deep or connected to the Indian Ocean as it is today. So you could have walked this region almost certainly during this period of time. So by the time we're getting over here into India, the subcontinent of India, we are looking at a region of time somewhere around 70 to 65,000 years ago. And India is going to be incredibly important because India is going to be the first place other than Mesopotamia that is going to be this really vibrant opportunity for humans to hang out. If you look at a lot of the area between Africa here and India, it's not necessarily hospitable, even though the climate at that point in Earth's history was much more wet, and there were lots more arid, what's my word here? There were more temperate zones and less arid zones. Even so, this region here in the interior of the Arabian Peninsula was still very much of a desert, and this area here in Iran is still very, very rugged. But when you get here to India, look at how nice and pretty and green India is. And there are large water sources. There is a lot of room to expand, lots of opportunity here for farming and all sorts of game in the area, small game that's good for eating, some large game that's used for domestication, things like cows and elephants. Lots of good stuff in India. And India is going to act as a hub of migration. And when human beings get to India, they're going to hang out in India for quite some time, long enough to develop individual haplogroups. So if you do any of your own genetic testing and you end up with the M, N, or R haplogroup, you are related to somebody that lived in India somewhere between 70 and 35,000 years ago. And we know this because the populations of these people became so culturally and ethnically identifiable that they brought their genetics more in line with each other and created an identifiable subgroup of people, or haplogroup, right? So India offered humans a lot. It gave them everything that they needed. It gave them all the cool stuff. But again, over time, population is going to grow. So India, after it acts as this hub for somewhere between 20 and 30,000 years, is going to give up its people. And there are going to be several really big groups or several movements of migrations that come out of India. The earliest one is the one that's going to go down here into Southeastern Asia. This region here, which we sometimes refer to as Indochina, though that's a very colonial term. I prefer the term Southeastern Asia, which is today the countries of Burma and Thailand and Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, down in here into what is Indonesia. So these big islands coming out of India, down into these regions, and then down into these islands here, and ultimately down to what is today Australia. So it is fair to point out that during this period of time, both this region right here and what is today Australia were much larger. So if we're just looking at Google Earth, you can see here that you have this lighter blue. That indicates that the water there is not as deep. And a large majority of both this region here and this region here were two very big ancient continents. And the Indonesian region continent up here was called Sunda. And this region down here is referred to as Sahul. Now, of course, these are modern day terms that geologists use to refer to these ancient continents. But it's important to know that you could have walked almost all the way down from Indonesia and Southeastern Asia to Australia. You would have been able to see land that would have allowed you to make very brief water journeys to get you from Sunda to Sahul. And there are lots of really neat theories about the spread of both humans and animals that deal with sort of boundary lines between these islands here. You can look up a lot of this stuff if you want to. But the idea is that this first big movement out of India is going to be what populates all of these southern regions. And along the way, it is fair to note that part of this group that's moving down here into Southeastern Asia is also going to come a little bit north up here into China. And that's an important group as well. We'll talk about them in just a minute. Got to stay underwater. Still last comment. Okay, so moving along. The group that gets up into China is pretty important. Now, it's fair to note, some people, especially Chinese anthropologists, suggest that they have found human remains in China that date back to 100,000 years ago. Now, that's a questionable thing. First off, that would be more or less against the majority of the data that we have. But a lot of these same anthropologists from China also think that Homo sapiens first developed in Asia. I mentioned previously in stream that certain countries have what I call politicized archaeology departments. And I don't want to out of hand criticize the entire working group of the people in China. A lot of those people over there do good work, but I think that a lot of the stuff that China puts out and publishes has a very big political lean to it. Gasp. I know, China manipulates data? When's the last time China's done that? Anybody? Yeah, sadness. The working theory is that if the remains the Chinese actually located were modern Homo sapiens, and there is doubt about whether or not they are not anthropological, if they are modern humans, actual Homo sapiens, or if they preserve some earlier Homo heidelbergensis typed traits. The theory is that if they were over there, what this basically represents is one small tribal group that left and managed to get over that far and then immediately died. Which seems kind of odd for one group of people to have made it all the way from Africa to China and then suddenly died. If they made it that far, you would seem like these guys are legit, right? These are the ancient Bear Grylls. They're the Leroy Jenkins of migration patterns. Oh, at least they have Kung Pao chicken. Ba-dum-bum. And I don't. I still can't find Chinese food in this city. It's driving me crazy. There is hope, though, for those of you that are keeping up with Shane Looks for Chinese Food. The Chinese restaurant that I really like popped up on the Waiter app. So maybe they have reopened. Fingers crossed. We're going to find out next week. Next week on Adventures in History, did Shane eat chicken from Chinese restaurant? You'll have to tune in to find out. Maybe I'll wear the adventure hat when I talk about it. Okay, so that was the first group out of India. The second group out of India goes into what we call Tibet, which is this region. Ooh, I'm off my map here. This region here, today claimed by China and several other small countries in the region. This is Tibet. So the second group of people out of India come into here. The third group are going to go back the way that they came. They're going to go back through this region right here, which is called the Khyber Pass, and end up back in this region, which is modern-day Turkey, northern Iran, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. And this group is going to be called the Indo-Europeans, which you may have heard of. Indo-Europeans are going to be the group around 40,000 years ago that move from that particular region here in what we call today Central Asia or the Near East, up through this pass right here, which is the Caucasian Mountains, not named after me, and through this little strait here that separates Turkey from the Balkan Peninsula. And the movement that is going to fill up all of Europe is going to come out of this region full of Indo-Europeans about 40,000 years ago. So Europe is going to actually be one of the later groups. Interesting fact about this particular moment in history. This is where, around this time period, you're going to start seeing the actual first people group that we can identifiably call Aryan. Now, the Aryans of history are not the same as the Aryans of Hitler. Hitler thought that they were the same, and he used this to prop up a whole lot of his propaganda garbage, but they are not the same group of people. The Aryan people are going to stay here in the Indo-European region, and they're actually eventually going to go back into India in a repatriating migration movement that's going to eventually set up the cultural mix that creates modern Hinduism back way long time ago in history. And if you're interested about that stuff, let me know and we could talk about it. But these Indo-European Aryans are not white people. And they are not blonde-haired, blue-eyed, master race eugenics people like Hitler likes to claim. He also claimed the swastika, which is an ancient symbol that had been used for thousands and thousands of years, and then ruined it. Hitler ruined a lot of stuff, including tens of millions of people's lives. That guy was a jerk. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, super people that Hitler totally was, except not. Forgot to look in the mirror on that day. So, Hitler was a jerk. Don't be Hitler. if you like Hitler as an ideologue, you are a moron. And I'll be more than happy to call you a moron to your face. So let's talk about China. We got our people over here to China. And this is going to be going around that somewhere between the 70 and 50,000 BC range, 70 to 50,000 years ago. And China's going to be another one of these places like India, where people showed up and they were just very comfy. Look at how green China is. Look at all the water that's there and all the natural resources and all of the animals and all of the plants that are edible. Good stuff. And so China's going to be another one of these migration hubs. And if you have done your history and you have your haplogroup A, B, or D, guess what? Somebody that you know lived in China. Yes, China and most of Asia has an enormously large population of bats. China and Japan and Korea have something like 24 different bat species. Of course, not all of them are good for eating and cause pandemic issues when you eat them, unless it was created in a lab. Was it in a lab? Are they lying to us? That's up for you to decide. Who knows, right? Anyway, so bats. So when you get over here to China, you're going to hang out. You're going to have your migration hub set up. Everybody's going to be chilling around for a while. You are not Alex Jones. Oh, man. I haven't said anything about gay frogs. I haven't tried to hawk you silver anything that I say is a cure for the coronavirus. And I'm not sweating, nor am I screaming or profusely crying. So I don't think I'm Alex Jones. I don't think I look like him either. I mean, maybe our head shape's kind of a little square. I don't know. I don't want to look like Alex Jones. Anyway. So where are we going to go when we leave China? You're going to go in lots of directions. China has a really widespread path of migration. You're going to get one group that goes north and east up into this direction, which is going to populate part of Central Asia and Mongolia. You're going to have well, that's northwest, you dum-dum. Yeah, how smart am I? Northwest movement that gets over here into Central Asia and Mongolia. But am I selling water filters? I'm not. And now you want Mongolian barbecue, which you could get at a Chinese restaurant if one was open in Hattiesburg, which they aren't. So we are being visited by the puppy. Again, I leave the door open because the puppy seems to get nervous if she can hear me but can't see me. So she's going to curl up on the spot here, and I think she'll be pretty good. But if you hear weird puppy-related noises, it's because there's a puppy in the room. Okay, so you get one group that moves to the northwest over here into what I lovingly call the stands, because all the countries over here are like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. And I could probably say some stands that weren't countries, and I don't know if anybody would catch it or not. I'm not trying to insult geographic knowledge, but this is one of the areas of the world where a lot of people don't pay attention to. Lots of oil over there, though. And crazy dictators. Crazy dictators. Anyway, another group is going to move up into this region of the world, which is called Manchuria, and end up over here in northern Russia. And you're going to get one group that comes from China and populates the Korean peninsula and then later Japanese peninsula. So up until about 40 or so thousand years ago, you could walk to Japan. It was part of a larger archipelago peninsula. Instead of being an archipelago, that's what I'm trying to say. So you could walk out to Japan. That's where the first people from there come from. And you're going to get another group of people that branch off down to the southern islands, including Taiwan and the Philippines. This particular group is going to be somewhere in the 30 or so thousand year range and be responsible for a lot of the population of all these little Pacific islands. So China's a big and important hub. And this particular group that went up into this region, which if you play Risk, know is called Kamchatka, this area is going to be important for the population of the Americas. And similar to the first big waves out of Africa, the first wave that gets into North America, doesn't really do so great. It tends to change a lot. What tends to change a lot? I don't know what the antecedent in there is. I'd be happy to talk about it. I just don't know what it is, and I do not want to assume what it is. The Existan region. Well, if you're talking about historically speaking, yes, they do change quite a bit. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, that region has been fairly geographically border stable. Mostly because Russia still has a very, very sort of heavy hand in that area. And also because those countries make a lot of money off of oil, and they're not necessarily what you would call rich countries, but they're not really lacking. They tend to have fairly small populations that have not really started running over the amount of natural resources that you can get. Some of those countries over there give away free gas. If if you're a citizen of their country, that you get a certain amount of gas every week for free because they just have so much oil. Pretty cool stuff, though. Hey, would you stop licking? Hey. The puppy has allergies, and when she gets itchy, she licks. And we give her allergy medication, but it takes a while to kick in sometimes. Hey, would you stop licking? Thank you. Anyway, so the first wave that leaves Kamchatka gets over into this region, which is called Beringia, or Beringia. And this is referring to the Bering Strait, which today separates Russia from Alaska, but during this period of time would have probably been a tundra. There's a lot of sort of bad information about human migration into America, and a lot of people think that this whole region was just covered in mile-thick glacier. A lot of this region of Beringia was actually dry land. Of course, it snowed a lot during the winter, but it would be a lot more like what this part of Russia or this part of Alaska is today. It's sort of a flat, open tundra land with small vegetation and small animals with big herds of things moving through it, right? And of course, at this time period, you have reindeer and you have the larger elk that existed during the Stone Age and mammoths and things of this nature. But think about it this way. If these big herds of mammoths, right, are moving through this area and the entire thing is covered in ice, how are they going to survive? Right? It makes sense. We can't hear her if it helps, the licking. Okay, thank you. It bothers me. I have this thing about mouth noise. So, the first wave gets over to Beringia about 36,000 years ago, and it doesn't really do so hot. It gets down into North America, somewhere into the Alaska, Canada, maybe as far down into what we would today call the Pacific Northwest, but it dies out pretty quick. And we know that because it's about another 10,000 years before we find human remains there. And you would think that we would find something if there was a population there over the course of 10,000 years, right? The second wave, though, is much more successful. And it shows up about 20,000 years ago. And what is really remarkable about the population of the New World and in relation to the population of the Old World is that it happens so rapidly. And part of this is because of the climactic events going on, and part of this is just to do with it being a different place. So as we're moving through the Old World, we're talking about this weird conglomeration of all of these different areas and all these different peoples and all this different stuff. And it just seems like it's taking forever, right? We started off 130,000 years ago. We're 100,000 years later. And we're just now getting to North America. The licking. Can't wait to catch this on playback to hear the context. Oh, Kyle. It is nothing negative. P.S. I'm working to provide channel viewership, but we'll watch this for real later. All right, Kyle, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for bumping the numbers up. So the second wave is a lot more rapid and it's a lot more successful. The second wave shows up around, like I said, 20,000 years ago, and it's going to split. And part of this is because of glaciers, which are very real during this time. The last glacial maximum is going to happen right around this time, somewhere about 11,600 years ago, at the end of what we call the Younger Dryas period, is the last glacial big event where everything changes really, really rapidly. So between about 15,000 years ago and about 11,600 years ago, there are waves of very, very warm weather. And when that happens, these corridors open up in these glaciers and allow people to move down the coastline here. And when they get to right about here, there's going to be a kickoff that splits down into what is today the heartland of the United States of America. This coastal pattern is going to be much more successful, though. If we're looking at this coastal pattern, it takes them only 2,000 years to get from Alaska all the way down to Central America, which is, by migration standards, blazing fast. You're going to see the first evidence of some stuff down in South America by about 16,000 years ago. So in just the span of 4,000 years, human beings go from Alaska to South America. And if we're looking at a comparative timeline, it took some humans about 20,000 years to go from Africa to Iraq, which is not even half of that distance. This is a weird scenario. We don't really have good explanations for why this is going on, unless you start bringing in the fact that the world was just much more warm and there was a lot more food abundant in the area, right? So warmer means more plants. If we're still doing hunter-gatherer kind of stuff, that's going to be a benefit to us as we move around, and our population is going to grow, which is going to push us further. I don't know if I really buy all of that. It's hard to really explain why this is so fast, though. So you're going to get people down in South America by 16,000 years ago, and this group that split off up here around 14,000 years is going to take about 2,000 years to finish up populating what is today Canada and the region that we call today the United States of America. So that's going to happen. Most of the Americas are going to be populated by the 12,000s mark. Some of the most extreme regions up in the Baffin Bay, Hudson Bay area, and then some of the islands that are down far in these archipelago chains are going to take a couple of thousand years longer, but I think everybody is pretty comfortable with understanding why. You're going into a more inhospitable climate. It's going to take longer for people to figure out how to live in that way. And the further away you have to go by boat, the less people are likely to get up and move, right? So to go back to our original metaphor, if I'm just moving from this room to the next room, that's fine. But if I've got to build a boat and then float half a mile across some water, I might just sit in the crowded room for a little while, right? Nobody wants to build a boat. Or maybe you do want to build a boat. I don't know. You might be a crafty person. That's really up to you. So over the span of that 115 or so thousand years of history, humans left Africa and ended up in the New World. This is going to have a lot of effect on comparative cultures. The reason why most of these ancient history groups, when you take history classes, start talking about stuff over here in Mesopotamia is because people got there first. And when people got there first, that's going to give them more time to build and do stuff. So it takes Native American peoples a lot longer to sort of catch up to the same level of culture because they were walking for an extra 100,000 years, right? Give them a break. This is, of course, going to be used in some truly horrible ways later on when we get to colonialism. You know, the people from Europe will show up and they go, oh, look at how these people live. They live in squalor and they don't have cities like we do and they don't have culture like we do. Well, yeah, you know, Europe had a 30,000 year head start on people in America. It's okay. And if you actually compare some of the Native American cultures, especially people like the Maya or the Aztec or the various tribes that we call the Inca or even the Olmec or the Anasazi, and you put them on a comparative timeline. So you show their first city or their first village and then you put them on a timeline and compare them to stuff like Rome, some of them actually develop faster comparatively than some of the really big civilizations in Europe. It's just that they just so happened to be doing that when the Europeans showed up with guns. So, are we there yet? We are there yet. We are there now. Human beings are the most resilient species that thinks on Earth, right? I know there are bacteria that will outlive us, and of course cockroaches and horseshoe crabs and all of that stuff. But when it comes to hominins, they had more jimmies. Yeah, they did. You gotta have somebody to decide whether or not this is good food or not. And Jimmy eats all the berries, and if Jimmy dies, you know not to eat those anymore. We are just too stupid to stop, right? So maybe 1,000 years in the future, we'll be talking about how humans first colonized Mars, or how we sent people to the moon and built a moon colony there. Apparently we can mine the moon now because of something that President Trump signed that gives us rights to mine the moon. It's a great idea. Change the mass of the thing that moves the tides on Earth and creates most of the life in the ocean. Yeah, just mine all the good stuff out of that. And I'm getting a little political. I should probably just shut up at this point. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about any of this stuff? I would be happy to build all of those space colonies with you. There was a Civilization game that lets you build space colonies. You want Gundams? I want giant robots too. I mean, who doesn't want giant robots? But of course, if you watch the Gundams, you know what happens with the colonies. It's always the Earth versus the colonies. Friggin' new types, whatever you want to call them. I'm getting really deep nerdy right now, and I know I've just lost some of you that don't watch Gundams. Gundam is a long-standing Japanese anime series about people riding around in giant robots, and I love giant robot anime. One of my favorite animes. I think I drive my wife crazy with giant robot anime facts. I do have at least two behind me. One of them over here this is Heavy Arms Custom, one of my favorite Gundams, and this guy over here is Strike Freedom Gundam, one of my favorite Gundams. Yep. And then beside this guy is Galvatron, was from Transformers, and then beside that is Mr. Potato Head dressed like a stormtrooper. It's called the Spud Trooper. And on this side you have Optimus Prime, and on that side you have a Mr. Potato Head dressed like Darth Vader, called Darth Tater. Your love of giant robots is somewhat disturbing. I don't want to kill everything. I just want to conquer the world and make everybody act nicer and think. But of course that makes me a fascist. More of a Macross fan. Hey, I'm down with Macross too. The idea that you get Transformers and giant robots that you can ride in. Hey, that's magic for me. I can fly a jet plane and have a giant robot. I would love me a Veritech. So I guess I'll just open the floor to any comments about anything. How's everybody doing? Everybody doing all right? Let me know. If you have questions about this material or other history material, let me know. I'm officially done with what I would call the show for the night. I'm doing my best to try to keep these to somewhere around an hour. I know there's only so much attention span that people are willing to give to history, even if I try to make it fun. Also, if you have comments or can give me feedback, I would love to hear how I could make this more interesting for you. And I would love to know what kind of stuff that you would like to talk about. One of the things that I'm looking at doing to give you a little bit of a peek into the future, I am currently working on another 2-part series that I think will happen next week and the subsequent week about the process of how human beings transition from hunter-gatherer all the way through empire, because I think that there is a sort of formulaic pattern that you can apply to virtually any culture on Earth, and I think that's helpful to know. But after that, I'm really going to want to hear some opinions about some stuff. We could talk about cultures of the Earth geographically, historically. We could talk about sort of larger topics like art or music. I know we've got a lot of artists in the room. We could talk about language and the development of writing. We could talk about lots of different things. But I want to hear from you, because part of this is not just supposed to be me sitting here as a talking head running my mouth, but actually talking to people about stuff that they want to learn about, stuff that they feel comfortable asking about, stuff that they know a little bit about but want to know a little more about. So I would be very happy to hear from you all about any of that stuff. You can send me a whisper. You can shoot me an email. You can type it in the stream here. I know some people are much more of a fan of just listening, and that is absolutely okay. You should have no sort of feeling of being left out if you don't chat. I hope everybody has a good time. So are there any questions about anything? By the way, from this distance and resolution, I swore Galvatron was Deathscythe Health Custom. I do have Deathscythe Health Custom model. My initial thought was the sort of angel demon over my shoulder thing. So you've got crazy people, and I don't know why that makes Darth Vader over here on the angel side. I should maybe put I have a Yoda. That's a Mr. Potato Head. Maybe he needs to go over there and put Vader over there and then put the Spud Trooper somewhere else. I don't know. If you have interesting ideas. Also behind me, I have a really cool painting of the Riddler. Riddler is my favorite Batman villain. My wife painted that for me. Super cool stuff. Really, really great present my wife gave me. He was a Jedi and died a Jedi? Yeah. He's a pretty bad guy, though. I don't know if I can forgive him. He did kill younglings. All right. Okay, so last call. Anything else that we can chat about? Open floor for anything. I appreciate the attempt. Anything that you want to talk about, anything you can ask me about. Otherwise, I think we might be done. Let's see, though. Anybody want to throw in anything here at the end? Nope. So I hope I didn't freak anybody out by whispering into the microphone earlier. I was not trying to do Alex Jones. All right, everybody. Thanks very much. I know what I can do. I can see if anybody is online, and then I can see if we can stream or raid anybody. I did not do this last week because I am not used to thinking about potentially raiding people. So let's see who might be online. Aha. I have a friend that I believe was here at the beginning of the stream. And I think we might go raid Daria. Okay, so Daria Axanova is a very talented artist. She does cut paper craft light boxes. And I'm not describing it very well. Essentially what she does is she'll draw stuff and cut them out of paper and then mount them on different layers in boxes, and then she will set these layers apart so that it creates a sense of depth. She's also very, very cool. Did I raid her last time? I may have raided her last time. Why not raid her again? Yeah. I don't know. How about this? We can have another friend, David Peterson, who's a friend of the channel. Also does really cool artwork. I will let you all decide. Who should we raid, David or Daria? I'll let you all vote, or just say so. Who do you want? Who do you pick? What's your opinion? Somebody give me something. Everybody goes quiet. Bueller? I don't think we want to raid Bueller. Okay, so if we raided Daria last time, maybe we should raid David this time. So that way we can be equitable with our raids. From what I know of history, you don't mess with the Russians. Well, if I raided her last time, I should spread the raid love. Okay, so we will raid David Peterson. And I'm going to click the little start raid here button. Thank you everyone for coming by the show. Please, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to let me know about stuff. If you want to follow me on social media, please do so. You don't mess with the mother-in-law. You don't mess with the mother nature. You don't mess with the Ukrainian. Okay, yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you all have a very great night. And I will see you all in just a little while. Everybody ready? Okie dokie. Here we go.